Hey everybody, Southy here. I want to talk about the debacle that is the Sydney International Speedway and the concerns that I think everyone who wants the Speedway to succeed has. And that I definitely have. Now, I'm not here because I want to take it on. At my stage of life, I'm not. There's no way I would be prepared to take on a financial risk like that. But what I do have is over 30 years' experience in not only promoting but producing major events, and over 40 years in the motorsport industry, where I had a first-hand knowledge of how major motorsport events are run, as I was involved in the Australian NASCAR Championship down at the Calder Park Thunderdome and all over Australia from when it started until it ended for 14 years. I was close friends with Bob Jane, and I had an intimate knowledge of how things happened down there and how transparent it all was and how everyone knew exactly what was going on and how everyone knew how much they were being paid and all those things, and how well he ran that. Now, people are going to say it failed or it fell over or blah blah. Well, it didn't fail because of Bob. It failed because of us, the actual competitors. There wasn't enough people like Ian Thomas, George Elliott, Robin Best, Bruce Peacock, John Sidney, people like that who were investing the money on new cars and new young drivers to keep it going. And that was why what happened. We just weren't putting a good enough show on to maintain the crowds that we were getting. We were getting close to 60,000 people to our events. So it wasn't anything Bob did. Bob did a fantastic job of making it happen, but in the end it was the competitors who let it down. So moving on from that, let me just say this. The Honourable Scott Farlow last year put went to Parliament and went forward with his concerns on the Boldy family who had the sublease of Sydney International Speedway, and they are Yvonne Boldy is the director of Sydney International Speedway Proprietary Limited. His concerns were that how does an almost 80-year-old, he's 78-year-old woman at the time, with no definable motorsport experience, have what's necessary to run a $110 million motorsport facility? And I think that's a valid concern. His other concern was that her director, she was just a shadow director. Her directorship was just so that her son Troy could actually run it, because he wasn't allowed to be a director because he's bankrupt. So there's a couple of issues here. Firstly, to run any business of that magnitude, you need to have money behind you. You need to have plenty of money, because there's no way in the world a business like that is going to be profitable or make money in the first year, or maybe even the first 2 or 3 years. So you need to be able to float it and promote it and build that business. If you're bankrupt, you can't have that sort of money. So if it is Troy Boldy running it from behind the scenes, which is what the Honourable Scott Farlow suggested or was concerned about, how does he do that without any money? And if it's not him, if it's his mother Yvonne, how does she do it with no experience in motorsport at all? So that's the issues with that. This whole thing is set up to fail. You've got it's basically a pyramid scheme. You've got the government who own the facility. They've leased it out to the dragway people. They've sublet it to the Boldy family. And now they're putting a manager in. Last year when they appointed Gary Wilmington as a manager, I thought, great, this is fantastic. Because he's the guy with the experience and the knowledge to be able to run that and run it well. After the complete stuff up that was the Kellys, because they were never going to be able to run a facility like that. I know they got their supporters from their old speedway, but this is a different kettle of fish, and you can't run a motorsport facility from the back gate. You can't expect the competitors and their pit crew to finance the running of the event. It's got to come through the front, and you've got to be able to pay for everything if the money doesn't come in. Now, there's concerns from team owners this week that the Bowlies were suggesting they're not going to pay any prize money. No Premier category is going to run without prize money. They're just not going to do that. And then there was a suggestion that, you know, if they had a good gate, then they'd pay something out of that. This isn't a community thing where everyone puts in and we just split it up at the end. You've got to, the promoter is responsible for paying, and it needs to be transparent. What Bob Jane used to do, and what any Speedway promoter does, is post the program for the season and post the prize money pool and the split, so everyone knows what they're getting and what the races are beforehand. Transparency. And that's not happening. So no teams are going to turn up to race where they don't know if they're being paid. This is a really concerning situation, because how many more times can this fall over before the government just pull the pin on it altogether and we lose what could have been the best track in Australia? The work Gary Wilmington done was fantastic. He reconfigured the track, made it really raceable, fixed all the issues at the track, but he was constrained. He had obviously financial constraints on what he could and couldn't do. You can only do so much when you've got very limited money. Like he was the manager. He wasn't the promoter. He wasn't the leaseholder. He was the manager. So he could only do what he was able to do with the money available to him. He's the guy that should be back in there. Plus, there's plenty of other people in Sydney who have years and years and years of knowledge and experience in speedway racing in Australia that could be jumping there and be involved. I don't think the current sublease holders are the people, and I don't think the way it's set up at the moment is the right way it should be run either. The government need to put a red line through the whole deal and just put a leaseholder in there who runs it. Doesn't sublet it, doesn't put managers in, doesn't, obviously have a manager, but they need to be on the ground. And it needs to be someone who has the money. You need to have a couple of $1 million of float to go into that business, because you need to be able to pay for everything up front, and then, because you're not going to get the money through the gate to fund everything. You're just not. So start making some noise, people. Start ringing the minister. Start ringing everyone, and ring Parks, New South Wales, Western Sydney, Greater Parks, or whatever it's called. Ring everyone and start making some noise, because we'll lose this speedway if it keeps falling over, and I think it will fall over again because we just don't have the people to do a good job at the moment. As I said, if you're bankrupt, you can't have the sort of money it takes to run a speedway. And I don't think someone who's almost 80, who's never had any definable experience in motorsport, is the person to be running a speedway. So either of those scenarios don't spell a great result. Cheers.